All right, I think we're going to get started with just the introduction here while we let more people join us. We do have a long presentation and we want to respect everyone's time. So good evening and thank you for joining us. My name is Atara Margulies and I'm the lead planner for the Friendship Heights Sector Plan. I am joined here tonight by the full Sector Plan team. And so before we get started, I'd just like to let everyone from Montgomery Planning turn on their video and say hi and introduce themselves. And then we'll get started. You're actually going to be hearing from many of us tonight over the course of this presentation. It won't just be me talking. So I'm going to go sort of in alphabetical order. Audrey.
Hi, good evening. My name is Audrey Vogel. I'm a master planner on the West County team. Nice to meet you guys.
Alex.
Alex Pemberton, real estate planner with research and strategic projects.
Bhavna.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bhavna Sivasubramanian. I'm the housing planner for this plan on the Design, Placemaking, and Policy Division.
Christina.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christina Sasaki, and I'm your park planner.
Allie.
Hallie Johnson. I'm an environmental planner.
Hey, Sue.
Hey, Sue Beck, a schools person.
Jenna.
Jenna Gilbert. I'm an intern with the West County team.
Larissa.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for spending your evening with us. I'm Larissa Clevin. I'm the Master Plan Supervisor for West County.
Renetta.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ronetta Zach Williams, and I'm the transportation planner for this plan.
Tina.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tina Schneider, and I'm the environmental planner.
And Tyler.
Environmental planner.
Hi, I'm Tyler Milam. I'm the urban designer on the master plan with the Design, Placemaking, and Policy Division.
Okay, great. So that's all of us, and many of us will be talking tonight, and everyone will reintroduce themselves when they get to their part. So before I get to the agenda, I just want to give you a heads up about how this Zoom webinar is going to go. This presentation is long. It should take us about an hour, and we will certainly leave time for questions at the end. Since we are on a Zoom webinar, everyone who's listening can't actually unmute, but you have the Q&A function, and that's where you should be typing any questions that you have. Staff is going to be monitoring this during the presentation. If there are easy questions, they might even answer them on the spot, and other questions where they're going to retain and then sort of ask them at the end. Larissa will actually be the one kind of looking through the questions and combining ones that are almost the same and making sure we kind of get as many questions and answers out there at the end of the meeting if possible. And anything we didn't answer, we'll still try and answer for folks when we send out an upcoming e-letter, as we've done in the past. And so if you have any technical help, I think you can use the chat function. And I just have this little graphic here, right? It shows you what's at the bottom of your screen. And chat will, if you somehow you lost your audio or you need the link to get back in or something like that, or you want to share the link with somebody else, that would be a helpful, you ask questions there, and we have staff that's monitoring that too. But for Q&A that you want us to answer at the end, please use the Q&A box. Now, anybody who's interested in closed captioning, it should work. If you click the CC button, it should be a pretty decent AI attempt at translating into captions what we say. And so I would say, I know there's some people who registered and said they were interested in that, so we enabled it, and hopefully it'll work for you. So let's go to the agenda now. So we'll start with a brief plan update and talk about where we are with regard to schedule. And then we'll move into our draft plan vision for Friendship Heights at an overall high level. We're then going to pause and do a summary of some economic analysis work that we wrapped up since we've last presented to the community at the end of visioning. And we'll discuss how the key takeaways from that work are informing our development of the plan. After that, we'll move into preliminary goals and recommendations by topic. We approach it by topic because ultimately the final plan document is likely to be organized that way. And then we'll talk about next steps. As a refresher, this is the plan boundary. And I think most people who are here have been participating since earlier parts of this plan are familiar, but we have it here in case we need it for reference. It's also a reminder that all of the recommendations that ultimately do make it into the plan only apply to the properties inside this plan boundary. I also want to note that we studied the context around the plan area, zooming out a bit, which included the neighborhoods to the north and east and west and the DC blocks to the south. This is all part of our context study area for the effort, and while the recommendations won't apply to those areas, they do take into account the conditions that surround the plan area. We try not to write master plans in a vacuum. We have also been coordinating closely with the DC Office of Planning, and we are taking into account the proposed zoning and development proposals for the blocks of Wisconsin south of Western, and we'll talk about that in a few slides. So let's talk about where we are in the plan process. Here's a snapshot. You can see with the green arrow, we're at preliminary recommendations, kind of almost halfway through the steps that we've outlined. Preliminary recommendations are just that, preliminary. They're draft ideas about what recommendations we might include in the plan. They're very much still in development, and they will continue to evolve over the next few months. We will have more opportunities beyond tonight to provide comments on these preliminary recommendations. And if you're on our e-letter list, we will be sending out an email in the coming weeks about additional opportunities to provide feedback. We are going to continue refining the ideas you'll hear tonight into a full draft plan, which will be called the working draft. That's just the technical term. And that's the next bullet point here. And we hope to be able to share that with both the community and our planning board by the summer. Then there'll be opportunities for official public comment in the form of public hearings, both first at the planning board, where the planning board reviews the plan, and then the second level of review at the county council, and there'll be another public hearing then. We don't expect the final version of this plan to be approved and adopted until sometime in the spring of 2027, which is to say that we still have a ways to go. Now we're going to move into talk about our overall plan vision. So we've done a lot of engagement and visioning over the past year plus. I'm sure many of you were listening to our visioning summary or have looked at the stuff we posted on the website. And we're not going to go through a recap of that now. And if you are interested, it is definitely still on the website. But as a refresher, this is a snapshot that summarizes many, but certainly not all, of the ideas we've heard about what Friendship Heights should be like in 20 years. We've heard that it should be more affordable and more accessible than it is today, that it should be multi-generational, vibrant, maintain its mixed use character. And we've also heard that with any change or growth, that this place should remain distinctly Friendship Heights. And so we keep all of these things in mind and the many, many more comments that we heard and themes that arose in the feedback. And we take the analysis that we've done and we take it all together and we come out with a draft plan vision statement. The revitalization of Friendship Heights will transform this urban neighborhood into a thriving regional destination and a welcoming community where people of all ages, backgrounds, and abilities can live, work, and play. Following this vision statement, we wrote 4 overall vision goals. And everything else that follows these in the presentation comes to support these goals. The first goal, enhance existing connections and create safer ways for people to walk, bike, or ride between Friendship Heights and the surrounding communities. Provide new experiences for social connection, activity, and respite in parks and public spaces throughout the plan area. Strengthen the Wisconsin Avenue corridor as a center of activity with opportunities for economic growth. And achieve a resilient urban area that strives to mitigate climate change impacts. So those set out some overall goals and themes for the plan, and we will get into far more detail in the coming slides. But before we get into those, we want to bring you some more reflection and takeaways from an economic development analysis that was recently completed. Along with the many comments we received from the broader community and the development community during visioning, we also engaged a real estate consultant to help us understand Friendship Heights from a market perspective. Much of what we are recommending in this plan is designed to help Friendship Heights regain its footing as a regional destination and as an economic driver for the county. The takeaways from this economic development analysis are important to informing everything we do from here on. And so I'm going to pass it over for now to the real estate planner on our team, Alex Pemberton, to share the summary of this work and its implications.
Thank you, Atara. As mentioned, this work was informed by both countywide studies and a real estate market analysis of Friendship Heights. And this extensive work all points to a single conclusion, which is that Friendship Heights is at an inflection point. Many things are working well in Friendship Heights today. If you visited the area for the first time, you would see storefronts that are mostly occupied, leafy, affluent neighborhoods all around, and well-maintained properties that should support reinvestment. But what we don't see from that snapshot is the trajectory of the district. And this is what we found in our economic analysis and what we heard in community engagement. There's a shifting composition of retailers, a shrinking residential population, and declining viability of the new investments that bring new amenities. Urban areas need a critical mass of office, residential, retail, and public amenities to thrive. But this crucial mix of uses is starting to fall out of balance in Friendship Heights. And simply stated, the trajectory has flatlined and we risk decline. Our recommendations are oriented toward interventions in this trajectory. So I'll discuss this context and our work a little bit more in depth. Then our specialist planners will detail our recommended interventions. Next, please. So to better understand how to shift the trajectory in Friendship Heights, we engaged a Bethesda-based national consulting firm to conduct a market analysis. They assembled case studies of similar areas across the country and found that Friendship Heights is unique in many ways. Transit access, the high density in a very small area surrounded by low densities in a broad area, high household incomes, access to natural amenities, and a really unique job composition with its medical office cluster. This combination is quite rare. And with all these unique features, there's not a single twin that we can point to and say, do what they did and everything will be okay. Instead, we identified strategies and best practices from a handful of areas across the country to leverage the unique aspects of Friendship Heights. Next. And another unique feature of the area is the abundance of large sites with development potential. And early on, we recognized that these sites can be leveraged to deliver the amenities we've heard the community desires and our research suggests would improve the economic conditions in the plan area. But potential on these sites alone does not make progress. And to this end, we had the consultants study development feasibility on the individual sites in the plan area. This study found that residential development in the near to midterm is the most feasible. We then drilled down to understand the most viable building forms and scale. And for apartment development, there are two sweet spots. 6- and 7-story projects provide a strong balance of density and lower construction costs, while much higher densities are needed to overcome the increased construction costs of concrete construction types, which means that projects don't become viable again until they reach a sweet spot of 14 to 22 stories. So this study informed our recommendations for height throughout the plan area. However, we must note from our existing conditions study and countywide research that current market and financing conditions for residential development are extremely challenging right now. We will propose interventions to address these challenges and promote the best land uses for the long-term interests of the plan area. Next. So our overarching goal is to improve economic conditions in the plan area, as Atara mentioned. We'll have limited direct influence, however, in part due to no public land opportunities. So we've oriented recommendations toward supporting and spurring private market activity. One area of importance is to ensure that the area maintains and retains a viable office market. The area has seen substantial contraction in its office sector, with negative impacts on retail and residential markets. The area needs a healthy daytime population to support restaurants' lunch hours and strengthen residential demand. Friendship Heights has a lot of existing assets for office users. It has transit access, it has those large sites and viable buildings that can support this effort. So we really need to think about how do we improve the feel of the area to be more attractive to employers and their employees to make Friendship Heights a place where people want to go into the office. So our goals here revolve around improved placemaking and amenities, which several of my team members will discuss in more detail, as well as leveraging key sites to attract major employers. Next. And retail plays a huge role in that placemaking effort. But retail also depends on a healthy office market and strong area demographics. Many restaurants in particular have struggled to make lunch service work in the district amid the contraction in its office market. Meanwhile, retail in other types is in transition as the broader area around Friendship Heights shrinks in population and households, many of which are aging out of their prime spending years. This is the only area of the county where retail spending is projected to decline over the next 5 years, and that's all driven by that demographic shift. So intervention to increase the employee and resident populations is needed to offset these trends. Because retail, restaurant, and entertainment amenities, again, are really essential contributors to a viable urban district. Next. And this all feeds into the residential market. It is our best lever under the current market conditions to bring the people, the ground floor retail space, and the public amenities we need to rebuild critical mass and to spur a positive feedback loop. More residents will bolster retailers and restaurants, which will improve the district's appeal to employers and employees. So our goals for this critical piece of the plan are to intervene in the challenging near-term market conditions for residential development, while also ensuring that we meet our long-term goals for affordability, increased resident population, and our high standards for public benefits, environmental sensitivity, and a sense of place. And Atara will now take it back and take us through land use and zoning.
Thank you, Alex. So now we're going to look at the next bunch of topics and with regard to preliminary goals and recommendations for each of these topics. We've set the stage with what the plan hopes to accomplish, and now a different planner will present each of these sections as we go through. I do want to emphasize that this is the first draft of all of this, of course, and it's largely focused on plan-wide recommendations. Eventually, there will be site-specific recommendations for some sites in the plan, and we'll talk to those when we get there. But we're not actually there yet at this stage. So I'll talk a little bit about what to come next. But here we're going to really look at sort of the broader picture. We'll start with land use and zone. This section of the plan will address density, height, proposed zoning changes, and the use of additional zoning tools to incentivize development that will support the overall plan vision we discussed above. So let's review the goals for this section of the plan. We want to encourage redevelopment of opportunity sites, and I'll define that term on the next slide, in the plan area. But we want to provide flexibility so future projects can respond to market conditions. We want to strengthen the existing retail corridor along Wisconsin Avenue, promote the development of housing, including affordable housing throughout the plan area. We want to support opportunities for future community amenities within this area, and we want to respect and maintain the existing transition of building heights from the adjacent neighborhoods towards the downtown core. And so the recommendations we're going to talk about now in this section are going to all help achieve these goals. So first, let's talk about opportunity sites because we just mentioned it on the previous slide. Sector plans routinely identify opportunity sites within the plan area, and these are properties that are underutilized from the current zoning perspective, so from the existing zoning perspective, which means there's untapped development potential on these sites, and that makes them more likely candidates for redevelopment over the life of this plan, which is about a 20-year vision. So you can see the sites that are outlined here. I think most of you are familiar with this map, but we'll just talk through it really quickly. We have the Geico site, we have the Saks and the Collection and 2 Wisconsin Circle on one side of Wisconsin. And then we have 3 sites in the middle that are currently underutilized. So one is at the corner of Wisconsin and Willard, and that's those 1-story retail buildings that include like the Gap and Banana Republic and a few of the buildings on Willard. Those are actually, it's owned by the same property owner, so we're considering it one site. We have 5550 Friendship Boulevard, which we did talk about during our visioning as a potential redevelopment site if the building owner would ever decide to sell the building or if the building becomes sort of not usable anymore at some future date. And we have what we're calling the Shoemaker Block, although a lot of people here will call it Parcel 6 because it was called that in the old sector plan. And it's the block of the several small parcels between North Park, Shoemaker, and Willard that were never consolidated and redeveloped in the past. And it's an untapped area that has some potential future opportunity in Friendship Heights. This isn't to say that we don't think there might be other redevelopment opportunities. We think these are the most likely, but the plan still addresses everything here, and any site could redevelop under this plan. These are some of the sites that are likely to eventually have site-specific recommendations, still at a very high level, but just a tad more detail about what could happen on these sites. But again, we're not up to that yet, but that is something that will come sort of in the next phase of our work. So we'll talk about height first and then density. The first recommendation with regard to height is to readjust the mapped heights, and we'll talk about what that is in a minute, throughout the plan, so that the tallest heights are at Western and Wisconsin and along the west side of Wisconsin as you move up north on Wisconsin. This height readjustment across the plan will also bring the mapped heights in many parcels on the plan closer to the actual heights of many existing buildings. And that's something we always look at. If we have a really big discrepancy between what a building is in real life and what it's mapped at, then it calls into question if that should still be the mapped height, meaning if the building were to ever be rebuilt, it might not be able to be rebuilt at the height it is today. And so that's something we always look at, trying to bring the mapped heights, if there's a discrepancy, closer to the actual building heights in an area. The mapped height is actually the height on the zoning map, why it's called the mapped height. And it's generally the height limit of future development on a parcel. There are a few exceptions, but that is the most basic understanding of what mapped height is. So now the second recommendation with regard to height is that we want to provide height transitions from the downtown core to lower heights where it transitions to the adjacent neighborhoods. And this will be achieved through a combination of adjusting the mapped heights and also a new tool called an overlay zone, a new tool for Friendship Heights, not a new tool in the county, that we are proposing that I'll explain in a few slides. So we're going to talk about sort of the changes we're proposing to the zoning map, which include height and density. And then we're going to talk about a proposed overlay zone, which has Friendship Heights specific development controls that allows us to really get what we sort of want out of the density and the height in a more flexible framework than the zoning map. First set of maps here. So on the left is the existing building heights in Friendship Heights. On the right is the existing mapped height in the zoning map as it stands today. So there are a few discrepancies, although generally we do have tall heights down here, and then it goes lower, and then of course it gets taller up at Somerset House, although there's no mapped zoning height because of the old zoning on this site. The buildings are 200 feet tall, so there's that. You also have sort of a mix of heights over here because of the different zoning on the Saks parcel between the building and the parking lot. And the village of Friendship Heights is all mapped at a height of 90 feet. I'm sure as many of you are aware who are familiar with the fabric of the village, the existing apartment buildings in the village, whether they be the condos or the rentals, are all well taller than 90 feet. Although there is a range, the datum is around 150. We also have sort of some taller buildings down here than what is currently mapped. And so those are some of the things we take into account when we remap heights in a sector plan. So here's the proposed heights. And I want you to remember that there's going to be additional height controls that will temper these in some areas in the plan. And we'll talk about that in a few slides. So on the right, you still have the existing mapped height. And on the left, you have the proposed mapped height. We're going a little bit taller at the metro because on top of the metro is really the opportunity for the tallest buildings in the plan. Staying tall on this side of Wisconsin, where we already have tall buildings that approach 200. Stepping down on the Saks parcel, the current building is, the height limit is 90, and so bringing the whole parcel to the even number of 100. Catching this up to make it compliant. And then looking at the rest of the village, and the buildings in this triangle are mostly at 150. And we do think that the fabric of the village should sort of stay at the same, treating it in a similar way where they're all at the same height, as saying, let's just raise, because the envelope is already up there, the buildings are already that tall, let's just raise the mapped height to something that's more consistent with what's there today. And the other change is to take the 100-foot height limit on the Geico site, and this was also consistent with the density change, which we'll talk about soon, and just bring it across the site, of course, not touching Brookdale Neighborhood Park, stopping short of that, just on what we would consider the developable part, because this gives a little more flexibility as to how deep into the parcel buildings that want to reach the max height can be. We will introduce more controls at the edge. We'll get to that in a minute. I want you to note that there's also some differences in DC. Right now, these are the height limits. They have a different zoning system than us, but the base height limits. And this is what's proposed because they are changing their zoning along Wisconsin Avenue as well. And they're also looking to sort of expand their mixed use, their zones that are a bit taller. So I just want to let you guys know why there's different numbers on the DC side as well. So we'll hold on to that height stuff for a second, and then we're going to move to density. And then we'll come back to all of it when we talk about the overlay zone. The zoning map establishes mapped density values for parcels that are mixed use, and it assigns sort of a density category to every parcel. In Friendship Heights, we mostly have mixed use parcels. We'll look at the map in a second, and we call those CR because it stands for commercial residential, meaning you can build either one or both of those things on that site. So here are the proposed recommendations with regard to density. As we do in every sector plan, we just take a look and see if there's any outdated zones that aren't used anymore, defunct zones, and we look to replace them with a zone that keeps the building compliant. We look at the CR zoning, the commercial residential mixed use zoning, and we look to see if it's sort of flexible enough. And something we've been doing in recent years is even making it more flexible. So right now, the way it is basically in order to capture all of your density on the site. If you are a developer and you own a site and it has a CR zoning, you can only max out the density on that site if you build a little bit of C and a little bit of R. So you can't go R, all R or all C. You must have a mixed use building. Now, that was the approach many years ago when the county introduced mixed use zoning, when it was a new idea, for example, to have a residential building with a coffee shop in the bottom, and they wanted to encourage mixed-use development in the downtowns that we used to call central business districts. Now it's been, a generation or more of that sort of development in Silver Spring, Bethesda, Friendship Heights, and those mixed-use zones are very well established. And what we've noticed is that we need to be more flexible in order for the parcels to be able to respond to market conditions when they're being redeveloped. If you say you can build a residential tower here, but you can't get all your density because you need a retail space, even in a place or on a street where retail isn't viable, that's not a good setup. So we've moved away from sort of requiring mixed use on every mixed use site. And in the downtowns, we are often making it possible for you to get all the density in a project, even if it's all R or all C or any combination. So that's what that second bullet point is about. Now, the third bullet point. As everyone knows, there are residential parcels from the Brookdale neighborhood, including in this plan boundary. We looked at that in the map. These are currently zoned R60. It's a single family residential zone. We're confirming that existing zoning and we're not proposing to change it. There are, however, 2 R60 parcels in the downtown. We don't usually see R60 parcels for single family residential in the downtown core. One of them is the Saks parking lot, and one of them is sort of half of the Geico site. And we are proposing to make those CR to make them more flexible for redevelopment in the future. And then the last thing is there are 2 small site-specific overlay zones in this plan. And we're looking into whether we really need them or not, or how we're going to modify them, or maybe, eliminate them altogether. That is something that we're still sort of studying. So let's take a look at the existing zoning map to understand what we have. So this map shows you the zoning types over here. So the CR, the orange, is the mixed use, and this is today. So we've already got that in Friendship Heights on most parcels. Everything in yellow is the R60 single family residential. And so you can see that there's one on the Saks parking lot and on the Geico site. There's also a buffer part of the Somerset House parcel that's R60, which we may need to update, but it's really would just be an administrative thing. It's not going to change anything about that parcel materially. And then we have these sort of smaller overlay zones, one on Geico that was designed to transfer density from other parcels. It's a bit confusing. And a small one here that was really intended to guarantee that there'd be a grocery store on that parcel as it redeveloped, which is how we got the grocery stores that we at least used to have there. And you can see the DC zoning as well, just to give you the pattern that continues down Wisconsin. The light orange is also their mixed use zone. So their mixed use zone continues down Wisconsin. And then they've got different kinds of residential surrounding it as well, similar to what we have. So here's the map with the proposed zones. As you can see, turning the Saks parking lot orange and then extending the orange DR zone across the Geico parcel, but of course leaving Brookdale Neighborhood Park, which is this triangle, as the residential zone it is now, which means it can, it retains its park character. And we've also, we're not showing those overlay zones, and we'll keep you updated as to where we land with those. And you can actually see here, DC is planning on expanding their mixed use zone here as well. You'll note that there are no actual density values. We are still working on this. In the CR zones and the commercial residential zones, the way density works is by a multiplier called FAR. FAR stands for floor area ratio. And it's basically a multiplier of your site area. So for example, most of the parcels here are an FAR value of 3, which means that if you have a parcel and it's 10,000 square feet and you have an FAR value of 3, you are able to develop 3 times that 10,000 square feet in a build. So that would be a 30,000 square foot build. 3 is kind of a mid-range of density for a commercial residential area. Most of the CR blocks are zoned that way now. We are considering keeping them pretty similar to the way they are now from that perspective. And so we will be coming out in future updates with an actual proposed zoning map with all of the values assigned, but I just wanted to give you an update as to where we are now with that thinking. So we've talked about the height, the mapped heights, and we've talked about the mapped zones. Oh, and just in case you're wondering, sorry, I should say this, the residential parcels go by units by acre density, so it's different, but we're not proposing to change any of these residential parcels here. They're all staying the same, and so is the park over here and this park, and so there's just no change to any of that. So we've gone through density and height, and now we're going to talk about an overlay zone for the plan. And you might say, why do we even need that? Well, the zoning map is, even though it's multicolored, but it's very black and white. It says, this is the height on this parcel. This is the zoning on this parcel. If you want to be more nuanced, if you want to allow specific things in Friendship Heights that we don't allow elsewhere because Friendship Heights has unique conditions, the best tool for that is to create an overlay zone. It's a separate part of the zoning ordinance that basically goes on top of the zoning map. So it has additional controls. Sometimes it can override and even add an extra layer above the base zoning map. And that's what we're proposing to do here. It is a tool that we have used in the county and other plans and other downtowns. Here's a map showing the proposed overlay zone. We are not including the Brookdale properties or the Somerset House properties. And the main goal of this, it's really focused on the downtown core, is to help maintain the height transition between the downtown core and the adjacent residential neighborhoods. And it will also provide a mechanism for allowing projects to obtain additional density in exchange for public benefits for them to build up to the maximum height. And I'm going to explain each of these things slowly. First, let's talk about the height section. The overlay zone would identify height transition areas at the opportunity sites that are immediately adjacent to the low density residential neighborhoods like Chevy Chase Village and Brookdale. And so you can see these hatched sort of pink areas along the edge. And this is the diagram. This is our first diagram of this. So there's a lot we haven't figured out, but we want to explain this initial concept so we can continue talking about it. Buildings in these zones would be limited to a specific height. which we have not figured out yet, but given that it's next to a single family home neighborhood, it would not be too much taller than sort of our the height limit, which is 35 feet in those adjacent neighborhoods. And so the height transition area might go to 40 or 50, but it would probably stay there. We haven't figured out the depth of that yet, but we will be. And basically, you would, even though the underlying zoning might be 100 on Saks or on Geico, if you're building anything in those transition areas, it would have to be lower than that. It sort of overrides that. Conversely, if you want to take advantage of the full height that's mapped, the building, your building, has to front on these main streets. You can't put a building in the middle that doesn't touch the street that gets to that max height. The max height buildings have to be pushed up against the street, and there's going to be a mandate for lower development if there is any development that's along the backside of these sites. There are already existing rules in the zoning code that mandate how to transition when you're in a CR zone opposite a residential zone. But actually, this approach would be more conservative than that and give us a sort of a deeper transition area. We have more to figure out here. We have to figure out also the overlay zone will provide guidance on how to transition from the transition area in terms of height up to the street. And it will sort of address all of that. And even though these zones look the same on this map because it's a diagram, they'd probably differ in depth relative to their own, to the sites and the own conditions there. That's all stuff we're going to continue to work on. The next thing that the overlay zone will provide an opportunity for is really building on sort of approaches we've used in the county before and really bringing something that Friendship Heights really needs. We have heard a lot in this plan about community amenities. And I want to explain before I get to the next slide how development works. I mean, I'll show you the diagram, but how development works in this county. Before we get into this diagram, just focus on the background here first. If you are a property owner and you want to develop your property into a new building and you are in a CR mixed use zone, you have two choices right now. You can do something called standard method or you can do optional method. Standard method gives you only a 0.5 FAR, so that's half your site area. You can take that amount of density in gross square building footage and you can develop that without ever coming to go through planning department review or the planning board. You just go ahead and do it with get your permits and go ahead. If you want to capture the density that's mapped, the maximum density mapped on your site, so that 3 FAR we talked about earlier, right now, today, and this is not part of the overlay zone, this is how it works everywhere in a mixed use zone. You have to go and look at our county approved public benefits guide called the Incentive Density Implementation Guide. And it has all these public benefits and they all have assigned values of FAR. Affordable housing, public art, public spaces, infrastructure improvements like streetscape improvements, even green building strategies, and many more. You figure out which ones work for your project. You make sure they add up so that you're earning your 3 FAR, and that's how you proceed. And that's one way that we can make sure that when a building comes into a new neighborhood, they're also providing some benefit to the community. We are going to double down on that in Friendship Heights. We don't have that many sites that would fall under this, that would need to take advantage of this. But let's say one of those sites decides to redevelop that's not that big. And so it doesn't have a ton of density on it already, but its height is at 100 or 150. So you work on a building, you figure out how much FAR you have, and you realize that you can get to your mapped density, but you still have another 60 feet until your mapped height limit. If you want to go above that mapped density and continue building to the mapped height, you'll have to continue providing public benefits. Right now, you're not allowed to do this, but in the overlay zone, we would allow that. We would take a look at the public benefits in the guide, pick the ones that are the best fit for Friendship Heights, and say, maybe even give you a little more credit if you're going to go above. Because if you're going to build a bigger building here, we want to make sure the community is benefiting from it and getting more of the things that they want. And many of the things that we heard about in engagement about community amenities are public benefits that already exist in this implementation guide. The guide is actually online. It was updated just this year after being the same, I think, since 2017. So these public benefits are have been, realigned with things that the communities want now and technologies that we have available to us now. And so it's really a great opportunity to say, well, we have this new tool, let's try and use it. Let's try and use it to our benefit here to get some extra amenities in Friendship Heights if there's going to be, a building that wants to go up to that mapped height. I know this is a lot of technical information to absorb, and hopefully you're putting questions in the Q&A. But we're going to continue moving on. This comes to the end of our land use and zoning section. I'm actually going to pass it over to Bhavna now to talk about housing. But I will say that we are going to sort of continue to, this overlay zone has a lot of stuff that needs to, more details need to be developed. We're testing out sites to make sure it sort of works with this sort of this theory that we just put in front of you in terms of getting additional public benefits. And of course, the next time we come back, so the community will have those details figured out. Thank you. Bhavna, go ahead.
Thanks, Atara. For new people and for just a reminder, I'm Bhavna. I'm the housing planner for this plan. So Alex provided some residential market context earlier. I'll be building on that and diving into specific housing recommendations for the plan area. So housing goals and recommendations fall under 3 buckets. The first is housing production, second is housing diversification, and the third is housing affordability. As a reminder of some of the existing conditions in the plan area, Friendship Heights has just over 4,200 units, 94% of which are in large multifamily structures, mostly which were built in the 60s and 70s. The area has seen very limited housing growth in the past decade, and so therefore increasing housing in the plan area is really a key goal to both meet the growing demand and to support reaching the county's housing targets. The second bucket is housing diversification. Through this plan, we want to facilitate the development of a variety of housing types, especially near transit stations and lines that contribute to corridor-focused growth. And finally, the last bucket is housing affordability. Currently, there are only 28 MPDUs, or moderately priced dwelling units, in the plan area, and these are all at Wisconsin Place. As a note, many of the other multifamily properties were built before or were not subject to the MPDU requirement. And so this plan aims to expand access to safe, healthy, and affordable housing for people across a range of income levels, household sizes, and life stages. Next, please. So now I'll go each category at a time, starting with housing production recommendations. We first recommend adding more units that are available to renters, families, seniors, and persons with disabilities. These were subgroups we specifically heard about during the engagement process that were facing challenges with existing housing in the plan area. Next, we recommend promoting the use of incentives to boost market rate and affordable housing, particularly near transit stations and along major corridors. The downtown of the plan area has both the Metro Rail Red Line and a WMATA bus loop that serve as opportunities for corridor-focused growth. And the photo here on the slide is of Strathmore Square, and this is a recent example of transit-oriented development in the county. We also recommend making property owners, I have one more, thanks. We also recommend making property owners aware of the existing incentives, such as the commercial to residential expedited plan that can help make new office to residential conversions more feasible. So while a thriving office market is really critical to sustaining a residential market, and vice versa in Friendship Heights, we also want to build awareness of existing incentive mechanisms. Now moving to housing diversification recommendations. First, we recommend encouraging a mix of housing types and unit sizes that can accommodate young families with children, first-time homeowners, and seniors. Again, these were groups we heard from repeatedly during community engagement who expressed concerns over their housing needs being met. In line with this, we recommend prioritizing family-sized market rate units and MPDUs, both in new residential developments and in redevelopment. And lastly, connecting back to what Alex had outlined, the retail and residential markets are closely linked. Without more housing and people, shops can't sustain themselves. Therefore, we recommend exploring opportunities to provide housing types with active ground floor uses. And the photo here on the slide is of Bethesda Row, which shows bustling ground floor retail below housing units. And the last bucket under housing is housing affordability. Friendship Heights falls under a high income planning area, the Bethesda Chevy Chase planning area, and therefore it already requires at least 15% MPDUs in new developments and in redevelopments with 20 or more units. Therefore, this is not a new recommendation, but we wanted to highlight that this requirement exists here. In addition to the existing MPDU requirement, the plan recommends further prioritizing deeper levels of affordability by providing units below 65% of the area median income in new development and in redevelopments. The plan also encourages the use of county, state, and federal incentives to help make feasible and spur the production of new affordable housing. And these incentives include the payment in lieu of taxes, the pilot program, which provides a real property tax abatement in exchange for providing affordable units to low-income residents, and also the federal low-income housing tax credit, or LIHTC, which gives tax credits to developers to keep rents affordable for low-income households. And the photo here on the slide is of the residences at Forest Glen, which was supported in part by the LIHTC program, and 143 of its 189 units are below 60% of the area median income. And I'll now pass it to Tyler to go over the urban design recommendations.
Thank you, Bhavna. I'm Tyler Milam. I'm the urban designer on the master plan. Next slide. The urban design goals focus on two primary topics, the public realm and building form. The public realm covers any space or built environment that is accessible for public use, regardless of ownership. This includes streets, sidewalks, plazas, parks, and other publicly accessible open spaces. The goals for the public realm are to increase connectivity throughout the plan area to promote walking and social interaction while fostering stronger bonds with surrounding communities, and to strengthen Friendship Heights as a destination that has a distinct identity with welcoming public spaces, lively streets, and a variety of uses. Building form encompasses the design of buildings such as height, massing, placement within a development site, entrance location, and architectural elements such as windows, shade structures, and balconies. In Friendship Heights, the goal is to elevate the quality of design in new development to create a welcoming environment that enhances the human experience while fostering equitable and resilient communities. Next. Friendship Heights has a unique identity that spans multiple jurisdictions with Wisconsin Avenue serving as the commercial heart. Future projects within the plan area should provide high-quality streetscapes that bring together active uses on the ground floor of buildings, visually interesting and well-designed buildings, and a variety of transportation options that come together to enhance a local character that is distinctly Friendship Heights. This can be further enhanced with stronger pedestrian and bicycle connectivity between the mixed-use core and the surrounding residential neighborhoods. This will increase opportunities for people to easily access the amenities of downtown Friendship Heights. Amenities such as parks, restaurants, shops, and other businesses could benefit from increased foot traffic. This could also enhance economic diversity and social interaction by attracting patrons that have otherwise may have otherwise opted for driving to destinations further afield once they got into their cars. Additionally, there needs to be a robust network of routes within the downtown core. The existing network can be enhanced by breaking up larger blocks with pedestrian through-block connections that reduce travel distances, provide greater access to amenities like parks, and encourage walking and social interaction. Providing greater diversity in routes throughout the plan area increases pedestrian activity and safety. Next. Encouraging public spaces that are easily identifiable, locatable, and accessible for public use increase the amount of people who will use them, creates a stronger sense of eyes on the street, and encourages community building. This can be achieved by framing open spaces with activating uses like restaurants, shops, and residential entrances. Building frontages that are designed at a human scale enhance the pedestrian experience by making spaces more comfortable, intuitive, and engaging environments. When people are comfortable, they are more likely to spend additional time in a space, making it livelier and more enjoyable. This can be further enhanced by implementing placemaking strategies such as art, seating, music, educational materials, and food at key locations to make spaces more interesting and in turn generate more pedestrian activity. Active, interesting, and comfortable spaces are where people want to be. Next. To elevate the designs of new projects within the planned area, we are exploring methods to provide a process of design review during the application process. A potential method to achieve this could be to incorporate Friendship Heights into the Bethesda Design Advisory Panel. This would include stakeholders from the community to review the designs of development applications. Another method is to provide design guidance for new projects that demonstrate different ways to achieve design excellence within the plan area. This could include massing, streetscape improvements, facade treatments, and other architectural elements. One of these elements could also be the inclusion of nature-based design elements to infuse biophilic sensibility into the overall design. Biophilic elements can increase direct connections to nature through plantings, views, and natural materials, or indirectly with reference to nature through design motifs. Incorporating biophilic elements draws nature into and its accompanying benefits deeper into the urban fabric. Next. Buildings and their designs do not operate independently. They are part of the community and as a whole and have a direct effect on the public realm and the vitality of a community. The most noticeable impact is where the building meets the street. How the base of a building interacts with the sidewalk and those using it can have either a negative or a positive impact. To encourage a positive impact, it is important for buildings to be located close to the street, provide active ground floor uses, streetscape improvements such as seating and shading, and architectural design that is interesting and pleasing to the eye. Ensuring this approach on prominent mixed-use streets like Wisconsin Avenue will promote a welcoming and lively public realm with diverse activity. Providing variation in building heights, massing, and scale provide diversity in visual interest as well as building stock. This results in a wider range of housing types, entertainment venues, public open space uses, and generally provides for a more inclusive, equitable, and sustainable community. And that concludes the urban design recommendations, and I will now be passing it off to Audrey to talk about community amenities.
Thank you, Tyler. Again, my name is Audrey Vogel. This section covers non-park amenities, which can range from things like street furniture to significant facilities such as a library. Next slide. Throughout our public engagement process, community amenities consistently emerged as one of the biggest topics of discussion. We heard strong feedback that community members want more places to gather, more services close to home, and amenities that help strengthen a sense of neighborhood identity. Highly requested amenities include a movie theater, library, and pharmacy with extended hours. As Alex discussed earlier, amenities are an important part of Friendship Heights' future vitality and are largely delivered through private development. Atara discussed the proposed overlay zone that is the primary tool to implement the goals and recommendations I will discuss now. So from a high level, the community amenities goals are to first encourage amenities that foster social interaction, civic gathering, and neighborhood identity. And second, expand access to community services and daily needs within the plan area in alignment with the concept of complete communities. Next slide. We're recommending that the plan incentivize through the overlay zone a significant community-focused amenity as part of future redevelopment. To provide flexibility in implementation, we're not recommending one specific type of amenity, but instead we're defining the types of activities this amenity could foster. This may include social and civic gathering areas, opportunities for learning, recreation, or arts, with an emphasis on activities that are inclusive for people of all ages and abilities. Next slide, please. We also want to incentivize the creation of third places, which are spaces in a community where people naturally spend time outside of their homes and outside of work. Successful third places are comfortable, highly visible, and easily accessible. These places help build community life and support the vibrancy that community members desire. Examples of third places include plazas, coffee shops, bookstores, and libraries. Additionally, we recommend that new development is designed to provide active ground floor uses that contribute to street level vitality throughout the plan area. Active ground floor uses are not just retail spaces, but any number of uses that are designed with building to street connectivity, as Tyler described in his previous slides about urban design. For example, this could include an art gallery or even a well-designed building lobby. That concludes my recommendations, and I will now hand it over to Jesus to talk about schools.
Thanks, Audrey. My name again is Jesus Beck, and I'll be going over the schools part of the plan. For schools during a master plan, like Friendship Heights, even if there is no school within the plan boundary, we still examine the enrollment trends and school sites in the area to make sure that the public school infrastructure nearby is adequate for serving the plan's long-range visions proposed. Next slide, please. So this map shows that there are, as people know, no schools located within the plan boundary, but the students living in the area are assigned to either Somerset or Westbrook Elementary Schools, Westland Middle School, and then Bethesda Chevy Chase High School. One thing to note is that the middle school and high school boundaries shown here are the current boundaries, but they're subject to change in 2027. The superintendent has just come out with the new boundary proposals, so the decisions will be made soon. The elementary school boundaries will also start being reviewed by MCPS soon afterwards. So this is just showing current boundaries, and they are subject to change. But based on the schools that are serving Friendship Heights now, recent trends show that the enrollment has already peaked, especially at the elementary school and as early as 10 years ago, and has been declining since at a rather rapid pace. So the latest projections from MCPS, which do not factor in any of the potential growth that this plan might bring to the area, the projections, show that the enrollment level at the elementary and middle schools will be less than what MCPS considers as an efficient level for a school to operate at. Somerset Elementary School in particular is expected to be at less than 56% of the school's seat capacity in 2030. This is the lowest in the county. With all this being said, this plan is very unlikely to be seeking any additional school sites or suggesting any capital additions to MCPS, but the team will continue to monitor any enrollment impacts from MCPS's boundary studies and the plan's recommendations. With that concludes the schools part of the plan, and next we'll be hearing from Ronetta about transportation.
Thanks, Jesus. Again, I'm Ronetta Zach Williams, and I will be discussing the transportation recommendations. Next slide. The transportation goals for the plan are to provide a safe and reliable transportation network for current and future land uses, to enhance the street grid and improve connectivity and facilitate multimodal travel, to improve the bicycle and pedestrian network in the plan area and to adjacent neighborhoods to ensure a safe and inviting environment, enhance the transit facilities and operations to increase service reliability, accessibility, and the user experience. And lastly, ensure all sidewalks and pathways are compliant with ADA standards. Next slide. The first recommendation related to transit is to explore extending the Maryland 355 South Bus Rapid Transit Route, which is also known as BRT, from Bethesda to Friendship Heights and dedicating a travel lane in each direction to enhance transit accessibility on this segment of the corridor. BRT could be defined as high-quality enhanced bus service that provides faster service and shorter wait times. The image on the right shows the full length of the corridor that is currently planned for BRT, and that is from Clarksburg down to Bethesda. The full corridor is planned for 3 service routes, and the southern service route would run from, or is planned from Rockville to Bethesda. So this recommendation is speaking to the southern service route and recommending to explore extending that from Bethesda to Friendship Heights. We're also recommending aligning existing and future bus stops with protected pedestrian crossings. Next slide. Continuing with transit, we have a very long-term recommendation, which would likely happen during redevelopment, And this is a recommendation where we work really closely with WMATA and other transportation agencies that have some sort of vested interest in transportation in Friendship Heights. And that recommendation is to look at exploring the Metro bus loop to a location screened by active ground floor uses. And these ground floor uses would be facing the street at the site and would create an inviting gateway entering Maryland from DC. Additionally, relocating the bus loop would improve some of the challenges at the current bus loop, like congestion, the bus bays being used for vehicle drop-offs, as well as the height underneath the building being not as tall for taller buses to access. Again, this would be a long-term recommendation that would be tied to redevelopment of the site. Also, related to Metro, we are recommending evaluating replacing the current staircase at the west side Metro entrance. And so that's the image on the bottom right, and replacing that with an escalator to improve accessibility. And this would also likely happen during redevelopment. Next slide. Some of the key recommendations for the pedestrian network include to improve lighting throughout the planned area with an emphasis at intersections, bus stops, the Metro bus loop, as well as future pedestrian and bike paths. We're also recommending collaborating with the Village of Friendship Heights to remove obstructions along sidewalks and installing high visibility crosswalks. Another recommendation is to upgrade existing brick sidewalks, in the planned area with accessible materials such as concrete, as well as establishing new clear pedestrian routes during redevelopment that link Chevy Chase Village and Brookdale to downtown Friendship Heights. And lastly, we're recommending improving wayfinding and signage in Friendship Heights. Next slide. For the bicycle network, we are reconfirming the bikeway recommendations of the 2018 master plan. We're also recommending collaborating with the Village of Friendship Heights to extend separated bikeways on Friendship Boulevard, as well as collaborating with the town of Somerset to improve the bicycle and pedestrian connection from the town of Somerset to downtown. Next, we're also recommending developing bikeways that connect Brookdale neighborhood to the downtown. And lastly, we are looking to expand micromobility options such as scooters and shared bikes in the plan area. Next slide. And looking at the street network, we're recommending consolidating and relocating driveways from Wisconsin Avenue to side streets during redevelopment. We're also recommending evaluating the implementation of a road diet on River Road and reallocating that space for a bicycle facility to enhance the bicycle network. And a road diet would involve reorganizing space on River Road through a lane reduction to accommodate safe travel for multiple roadway users. Next, we're recommending implementing safety improvements at existing intersections that could include treatments such as curb extensions and reduced corner radii. And lastly, upgrading the Hawk signal that is currently at the Hills Plaza and Willard Avenue intersection to a full traffic signal. Next slide. So continuing with the street network, the first recommendation is to reduce downtown streets to 2 lanes in each direction and reduce the target speed on these streets to 20 miles per hour. The second part of this recommendation, or the second recommendation in regards to the street network, is about updating Friendship Heights based on the Master Plan of Highways and Transitways, which is another planning policy document that classifies streets in the county. So with this recommendation, there is no implementation. It's really just like an administrative thing that involves amending the classification. So the first is reclassifying a portion of Friendship Boulevard and Willard Avenue to downtown streets, and these streets were previously classified as downtown boulevards. And as you can see, looking at the map, Wisconsin Avenue is classified as a downtown boulevard and is very different compared to Willard Avenue and Friendship Boulevard, just in terms of traffic volume. So it's really just kind of correcting that in the Master Plan of Highways. Next slide. The next recommendation involves parking and transportation demand management. So first, because there's no public parking garage in the Friendship Heights downtown, we have a recommendation that involves exploring opportunities to integrate a new public parking garage with a mixed-use development through a public-private partnership. We're also recommending to reevaluate the non-auto driver mode share goal. And this goal pretty much refers to the percentage of folks that telework or take commuter trips by travel modes outside of a single occupancy vehicle during peak travel hours. And lastly, we are recommending continuing to encourage transportation demand management, or TDM, in Friendship Heights downtown. And TDM is pretty much a set of strategies that are used to reduce single occupancy vehicle travel and promote more sustainable travel options like carpooling, public transit, walking, or biking. This concludes the transportation section, and I will now pass it to Christina to discuss parks and open spaces or public spaces.
Renata. Good evening, everyone. I'm Christina Sasaki, a park planner. Tonight, I'll be walking you through the goals and preliminary recommendations for parks and public spaces in the Friendship Heights plan. The first slide gives us an overview of those goals, and we'll be getting to the recommendations over the next few slides. So Friendship Heights is surrounded by several parks, but many of them don't yet offer the full range of outdoor experiences the community told us they're looking for. So our first goal is to make these spaces feel more welcoming and comfortable, places where people of all ages and abilities can relax, gather, play, enjoy, and care for nature. We also know that getting to these parks is not usually easy. As you heard in the urban design and transportation sections, there are real barriers like Wisconsin Avenue, the super blocks, and a lack of shaded, comfortable walking routes. This challenge makes harder for people to move around and connect with parks across the area. That leads us to our second major goal, improving connectivity. We want to make the parks easier to find, easier to reach, and easier to enjoy. Let's go to the next slide and start looking at our preliminary recommendations. So in this map, you can see the major parks and public spaces in the study area, along with development sites that Tara talked about earlier. You will notice right away how large the Geico and also the Saks and the Collection properties are. They really break up access to nearby parks and make it harder to move around. For the existing parks, we are focusing on making them easier to spot, creating clear and more welcoming entrances, and improving access overall. This especially applies to the large community parks, the Wheeler Avenue Park on the far left, Brookdale Park as we move down, and Western Grove Park on the far right. We are also looking at ways to make some of the more central public spaces like the Willoughby Park, the Friendship Heights Park, and the Wisconsin Place feel more welcoming. The spots are visible, but they are not used as much as they could be. Next slide. One of our key recommendations is to explore expanding adjacent parks and making their entry more visible when large redevelopment sites like the Geico site give us a chance to do that. The photo here tries to show the entry to Brookdale Park. As you can or cannot see, the entrance is pretty tucked away. It is hard to notice from the sidewalk along Friendship Boulevard and from the downtown area, which limits how many people discover or use it. Beyond physical improvements, we also recommend partnering with public space providers and community organizations to coordinate programming. Activities and events can help draw a diverse audience and make these spaces come alive, like the events from the Friendship Heights Alliance that they organize as showing the image on the bottom. Next. Another example that is a place that is right in the middle of everything and easy to see, but it still doesn't feel very inviting. It is surrounded by vehicle entrances and doesn't have many eyes on the park, so it ended up with low foot traffic, even though it's centrally located. Here, smaller improvements or community-driven programming, like the ones recommended in the urban design and placemaking section, could make a noticeable difference without needing major redevelopment. Next slide. Coming back to the map, the yellow dots shown here in the map where new public spaces could be created within these major redevelopment sites. Over on the left, you see the letter A, which highlights the Geico site, and then the letter B marking the Saks and the Collection sites. We are basically connecting the dots with the green connections between our existing and proposed parks and public spaces. It will give everyone a straight shot to the beautiful and loved larger wooded parks at the edge of the plan and new spots to hang out and play at the center. Next. To wrap things up, these new public spaces will focus on active and social experiences, such as outdoor concert venues, active play zones, and nature escapes, as illustrated in the images on the left, including wooded promenades, play areas, and dog parks. Over the next few months, we will polish these recommendations with your continued feedback. This summer, we will return back with more specific site recommendations that will guide the collective vision within this plan. Thank you for being part of this process. And now I will hand over to Atara, who will talk to us about the historic resources recommendations. Thank you.
Thanks, Christina. I'm sharing all of this on behalf of our historic resources planner, John Lieberts, who's unable to be at this presentation with us tonight. So one of the things we always look at in every plan, looking at the historic resources. Historic preservation recommendations for this plan focus on identifying, sharing, and formally recognizing historic sites that contribute to the quality of life in the plan area. Our goal is to recognize and interpret the rich heritage of Friendship Heights while encouraging the preservation and adaptive reuse of properties with historic significance. So we have two properties to talk about tonight. The first one is the Reynolds House, and this is located in Willard Avenue Neighborhood Park, and Montgomery Parks actually manages the house. It was built in 1899 by the Reynolds family, and the house remained in the family for nearly a century until MNC PPC purchased the property in 1995. At that time, Montgomery Parks purchased the site with the intention of demolishing the site to expand the park. But those plans did not happen, and the house is still there, and Montgomery Parks has been renting it out. And this is not the only house. They have a portfolio across the county of houses that are in parks that they do rent out. And although they do maintain the long-term plan to demolish the house, no timeline has yet been established for that to happen. So no, to date, until we started this plan, the Planning Board and the Historic Preservation Commission had not evaluated this property for listing in the Master Plan for Historic Preservation, which is the county's sort of official record of historic properties. The Montgomery Planning Historic Resources staff are evaluating the property now and have not yet completed that evaluation, but when they do, they will bring forward a recommendation on whether or not to recommend the house for inclusion in the Master Plan for Historic Preservation to our county's Historic Preservation Commission, or HPC, and that will happen in probably the spring, so in a few months. And the final draft of this plan will reflect whatever decisions are made at that juncture. The second site to acknowledge, although we don't have a different recommendation about it because it's already sort of designated, is the Isaac Shoemaker Family Cemetery. So in Brookdale, if you were not already aware, on Murray Road, there is a historic family cemetery, probably established in the 1850s. And it's already included in the burial sites inventory of Montgomery County, which means that it's already preserved and protected. And the master plan will just double down on what the burial sites of Montgomery County inventory already does, which is to ensure that the site is protected whenever there's any development review process going on the adjacent sites. And now I am going to pass it to Tina for actually our final recommendation section, which is the environmental recommendations.
Thank you, Atara. Next slide. Thanks. So many of the community members have expressed a deep affinity for the large mature trees, the well-shaded parks, and the two tributary slivers that flow through portions of the boundary area. These features contribute to the character and charm of the community. The environmental goals and recommendations were developed to support, to protect, and enhance these existing natural resources, as well as improve climate resiliency, prioritizing urban heat and environmental efficiency. The goals are to enhance climate resiliency through the implementation of environmental features and infrastructure that can withstand and reduce climate stressors such as urban heat, biodiversity decline, and fossil fuel consumption. To use nature-based design solutions to improve and enhance green cover throughout the community, to restore and improve ecological health, to prioritize high performance and energy efficient buildings, and to implement innovative urban design strategies to reduce environmental impacts. Next slide. These recommendations are designed to protect and restore existing forests, streams, buffers, woodlands, and woodlands. Also to protect the canopy and tree canopy and use state-of-the-art tree save measures and implement cool shaded elements into the landscape and streetscape, including canopy trees, stratified vegetation, shade structures, and shaded bus shelters. Next slide. So we recommend the integration of nature-based design solutions, and these are elements that you implement into the landscape, and they sequester greenhouse gases, they increase biodiversity, they provide habitat, they also provide beauty. So they really green up the area, and you can see in the graphic to the right some of the features that nature-based design is including. We also want to reduce impervious cover. There's a lot of impervious cover areas, some of the parking lots, some of the larger pieces of property have just a lot of impervious, and we would like to reduce those and add more green and environmental features to that. Next slide. So to provide additional urban heat reduction strategies, we want to use light colored, highly reflective surfaces on sidewalks, parking areas, playgrounds, and in gathering areas. And then we also want to provide a minimum of 35% green cover. And that could be including trees, intensive green roofs, or a combination of those two together. Next slide. The building recommendations are intended to support the county's climate action plan and to help the county get to net zero by the year 2035. Recommendations also help to lower the county's dependency on fossil fuel and increase climate resiliency by decreasing our dependency on supply chain. So some of the recommendations are on commercial residential zone property. We want to increase zoning points or focus the zoning points in the category of green building. And that will help us to achieve higher performance buildings that are energy efficient. We want to use on-site or see on-site alternative energy generation such as solar and geothermal, microgrids, cogeneration, energy hubs, and or renewable energy technologies that might be in future that we're not identifying. And then we also want to extend possibly to orient buildings to maximize solar energy in sort of passive or active solar absorption. And then we want to prioritize adaptable reuse of existing buildings. That's going to be very hard. Most of these buildings are old and outdated, but if it's possible, we'd like to see that happen. And Atara will now talk about the next steps.
Thank you, Tina, and thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for sticking with us through this long presentation, but we are done with our part of it. And the next steps, well, this is today, right? We had the virtual presentation. The next thing we're doing with this exact presentation is taking these recommendations to our planning board. That'll be next Thursday, a week from today. We brief the planning board on all of our progress. It's a briefing because this is a draft. And so there's no action taken by them. We'll get to hear their comments. All of those things are going to be recorded. This presentation is being recorded right now. Hopefully, excuse me, by early next week. We'll have the recording up on our website, and we'll be able to share just a little bit of updates about how to find more information about the preliminary recommendations in the next week. Eventually, we'll get the slides up as well, and there'll be a way online for people to submit questions and provide feedback. And so that's really what's next for us in the immediate future. We'll continue to be working on things. We also are continuing to meet with community members throughout this process. And so if you feel like you would like to meet with us or your group would like to meet with us, we are always happy to sit down and talk about this stuff with everyone. We've sort of been continuously doing that, and we'll continue to do that all the way until the end of the process. And with that, I know there's been a whole bunch of questions in the Q&A, and I think Larissa is going to start feeding the questions.
Thanks, Atara.
And I'll come back to this. We'll just go to the queue. I'll leave this up for everyone so people can write down my contact info if they need it. Clarissa, go ahead.
Sorry, Tara. Thank you. I also just want to take a minute and thank everyone for the comments and questions that you put in the Q&A, and kind of the conversations that you've been having. I wanted to start off the Q&A by introducing the Chief of West County, Elza Heisel McCoy, and there have been a couple of questions that I think really fall into his bucket of knowledge. So Elza, I'm hoping that you can start us off by answering some questions about the proposed development on the Geico site, particularly thinking about what the status of that plan is there any sort of workforce housing that's being proposed, and what elements that were recommended or approved in the previous plan, how do they, get carried forward?
A lot there. So we'll start off right now. The only application that has been submitted to the planning department for review is a forest conservation plan amendment that will allow Geico to demolish the headquarters building. So that application is under review right now. Yesterday, I think a sign went up on the Geico site, and a number of folks got emails inviting them to a pre-application meeting for Zell Partners and EYA Development to discuss the redevelopment of the larger site. This was something that when the planning board looked at an amendment to extend the validity period for the 25-year-old plan. This was something that we contemplated then. There's no application that's been submitted, so we don't know exactly what they're going to be proposing. The meeting that's coming up, I want to say it's in the middle of February, is really the applicants' meeting with you, the neighbors and community. It's to share their thoughts with you and to answer your questions and get your feedback. So if you're interested, I would encourage you to attend that. That is their meeting. It's not our meeting. It's a meeting that's required by the zoning ordinance. We will not be at that meeting. Once an application, or once the applications that are referenced in the pre-submission meeting notice, once those are submitted and accepted as complete, all of the application materials will be available online. The review timeline will be about 4 months. I will be the lead reviewer. We'll have a lot of this information in an update in our e-letter that's going out next week. So sign up for that if you haven't, because I think we'll be using that e-letter to also communicate about the regulatory applications. So I think we'll need to see what they submit, I think, before we can get more specific on that.
Thanks, Elza. We have a couple of other questions that also fall into the regulatory realm that, while I have you, I'd like to ask. How are developers held accountable for the public benefits that they propose in their applications?
So, as Atara mentioned, in the zoning ordinance, developers have to provide public benefits in order to earn the higher levels of density that come with the optional method of development. And those, both the public benefits and the density that they earn, are documented in the development applications that are submitted. These applications are, they're public. They undergo interagency review with the county agencies, parks, planning, and then staff recommendation is made to the planning board, and the planning board has ultimate decision authority on those regulatory applications. And the planning board's decision is documented in a resolution, which is legally binding, and those resolutions include conditions of approval. And so it's the conditions of approval that say in order to get ABC density, you have to provide XYZ public benefits, and the final approval that developers need to get before they can get a building permit is a site plan. It's very detailed, and so all of the um, all of the things and all of the conditions that need to be met in order to get a building permit will be documented in that resolution.
And also building on that, could you also please comment on how the decision is made, what amenities or public benefits are provided or proposed with an application?
So there is a list in the zoning ordinance. The incentive zoning update. There's a new guidance document that provides some more detail on what the available public benefits are. There's a defined list. It is the zoning ordinance, but the sector plan. So the sector plan fits into the development process in really a very central elemental way. And I'll get into that in a minute because I think there was another question about how that works. But the Friendship Heights sector plan will identify and prioritize which public amenities will be allowed or would be recommended, I should say, and prioritized. And so that will guide the review of the development application. In addition to having conditions of approval, the planning board needs to make certain findings that are outlined in the zoning ordinance. For example, the planning board needs to find that the recommendation meets the zoning requirements, is compatible with surrounding development, and is consistent with the recommendations of the master plan. So the master plan or sector plan will cover a number of things that all need to be addressed and verified as part of the application review. So that includes street rights of way. Those are set by the master plan. Frontage improvements, which can be sidewalks, can be related transportation improvements, bike lanes, crosswalks. Those are documented in the sector plan. There are design recommendations that go into a sector plan, environmental recommendations that all need to be addressed whenever a development application comes in.
Thank you. I think you may have answered this next question, but if you want to expand any on it, let me know of sort of what other elements of the plan need to be met or kind of considered when an application is proposed.
So it really covers, there are the plan-wide recommendations, which are a lot of the things that we're talking about tonight. And as Atara said, as we continue to move forward and develop these ideas, there will be site-specific recommendations. So if I own a property in Friendship Heights, I don't, and I wanted to redevelop it, I would have to not only substantially conform to the recommendations that apply to the whole plan area, but if there were some specific to my site, I would need to meet those as well. And I'll also just take this opportunity to sort of highlight the opportunity for interested community folks to participate in the process. So it starts with this pre-application meeting that we talked about. You can go and find out, what's going on, get more information, share your thoughts, ask questions. Once the application is complete, all of the materials are available online. You can meet with staff. You can reach out, and we're happy to come to your community groups, your neighborhood organizations, and answer questions about the development and review process, the particulars of the application. It will then go to an interagency review panel called the Development Review Committee. The public can attend those. It's more of a technical review, so the public won't have an opportunity to provide comments at that time. But then through the course of the review, community members can provide written comments to the reviewers that will be considered and included in the staff recommendation and the staff report. And then community members can sign up to speak to testify at the planning board's actual review of the development applications when they make decisions. So there's a lot of opportunity to learn more about the application and to share questions, thoughts, suggestions with staff and the planning board as that process moves forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Elza.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little bit of a disclaimer on the rest of the questions we will hear this evening. As Atara mentioned earlier, we are not yet at the plan stage where we are proposing site-specific recommendations. And we are getting there as our next step. So while there have been a lot of comments and questions that are site-specific within the Q&A that have been submitted, we're not going to be answering them tonight, but we will be carefully considering them as we move on to the site-specific recommendations, which will have an opportunity for public feedback later on in the process. And we had a question, particularly about how we are coordinating with the district. I want to comment on two specific things that we are working on. One in particular, we meet monthly and have been meeting monthly for quite some time with DCOP, their Office of Planning, both to talk about our work as well as the Wisconsin Avenue framework that they have completed and the zoning process they are currently undergoing, as well as meeting with transportation agencies and other agencies that impact the bi-jurisdictional nature of Friendship Heights. So we are consistently thinking about the neighborhood as a whole. Our next question is for Renetta, our transportation planner. And I'm hoping that you can comment a little bit on, as in the master plan process, how we balance proposing additional bike lanes with potential additional density or traffic.
Mm-hmm. As Atara mentioned earlier, and like looking at proposed zoning, when we so for every master plan, we do an analysis as well as modeling, and that looks at transportation scenarios, which are some of the things you saw me mention, like for example, bike lanes. We take that into account with some of the proposed land use and zoning changes, and we put that into a model and we examine different adequacy metrics to understand what are the traffic impacts with new density, as well as these traffic scenarios where we're talking about like adding a bike lane or reducing a bike lane. So we have like a method that we use to kind of check and see like what impact does this have on the street network in Friendship Heights and kind of like beyond, traveling beyond the plan area.
Thanks, Renetta. Elza, another question came in for you, building on some of the information that you previously provided that I think might be helpful for you to comment on, and that's how the current Geico proposal or maybe anticipated applications work timeline in concert with the master plan process.
As I mentioned before, the review for the development applications will be about 4 months, and the timeline for the sector plan is much longer. We're looking, in 4 months, we'll be looking to take our staff recommendation to the board. The sector plan recommendations for all of the properties in the plan area are really looking out for the next 20 to 25 years. And just because there's a development application doesn't mean it's absolutely going to happen. The current plan for the Geico site was approved 25 years ago and was never built. I think we have a very positive outlook, but I think there's a recognition that the plan is looking for a longer term, and if there are portions of the Geico site that are not included in the new applications, if those develop after the new sector plan, then they'll be looking at those recommendations. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but because the applications that were just announced yesterday are coming in this near term, it will be the 1998 sector plan, which will be the governing sector plan.
Thank you, Elza. And then our last set of questions are for Atara. They are particularly around the transition areas that you spoke of between potential new development and the surrounding neighborhoods. There are a couple of elements. I'm happy to repeat it later if you would like me to. But thinking about, just kind of talking a little bit more about the logic and the strategy that the overlay zone is presenting, as well as looking at those edge areas and maybe what their width might be or what they might look like, whether they might be green or, another presentation. So just a little bit more information that's been requested about that transition area.
Sure. Okay. So I'll try and explain again sort of what, I'm trying to do the three parts of that question. I'll talk about what the zoning ordinance sort of wants us to do now when you have that condition where you have a single family neighborhood and then a mixed use building across the street. Then I'll explain how the transition area idea is supposed to go a little bit farther than that. And then the truth is, after that, that's about as far as we've gotten in the concept. Meaning we haven't yet gotten to the point of saying, let's look at the sites, let's draw it out, let's figure how deep into the site the transition area should go, exactly how tall. We're going to have to test that from an urban design perspective to see how we think how we can get it to a comfortable spot. And that's the great thing about an overlay zone versus what the zoning code says. So right now, the zoning code says that if you have a single family home neighborhood, and I was going to try and draw a diagram, but I don't know if it'll make sense, but I do think that's the best way. And I wish I had done that already. If you have, I'll put this picture up, and I don't know if you can see it. Can we see it? No, my thing doesn't focus very well. All right, so we'll just try and talk about it. Let's say I have a house over here, and it has a height limit of 35 feet, which is the height limit for all of our houses in single family home neighborhoods like we have in Chevy Chase Village and Brookdale. And across the street is a taller building, right? And so that taller building can't just go straight up across the street. The zoning code says you go up to a height of 35, which is the same as across the street. And then you imagine that there's an imaginary line at a 45-degree angle going up, almost like a plane. And you can't go past that plane, but you can start going up right away as long as you don't hit that plane. So you end up with the step up, step up, step up. And that still gives you the sense of a building that's getting taller and taller and taller right across the street from you. What we want to do is say, here's the height limit on the single family home side of the street. And here's the height limit across the street. And you can't start going up right away. You can't go up till you get much deeper into the site. Now, I don't know what that depth is yet. We have to work on it. I'm sure it's going to be a different depth for Geico than it's going to be for Saks in the collection. Also, on the Geico site, as you may remember from Christina's presentation, and we're proposing like a linear park that would overlap with the transition zone. It would really help push the development on the Geico site away from the Brookdale houses. So we have to look at all those things together. But the idea is that we're going to say there's a zone that you can't just start going up at an angle, but you have a max height there that provides sort of like a datum, and it helps push that tall development to the other side of the site so that those tall buildings front on, Wisconsin, which can certainly take tall buildings, and not on Belmont or on the Geico site. The tall buildings will have to be at Willard and Friendship and not, all the way deeper into the site towards the Brookdale side. So I hope that helps. As to whether or not when we, the question about whether they'll be green, things like that, that's a great question. And that gets to the site-specific recommendations that we're not quite there yet. But on those larger sites, we will have site-specific recommendations about open space, about pedestrian connections, about how to approach large blocks and, sort of scale them down and do appropriate development that that sort of breaks up the block in some way. So a lot of the things that we talk about with regard to urban design and open space make their way into a site-specific form for the site-specific recommendations. They don't get too prescriptive, because if it gets too prescriptive, then we know it gets too hard to see any flexible development. But we still want to give more guidance, than we're giving at the plan level. When we have the infill sites that are much smaller and less constrained, you don't need to give as much site-specific stuff for those. You sort of know which way the building's going to face. It doesn't have a lot of choices. But things like building orientation, how the height will be shaped, what kind of open space, what kind of connections, that's all stuff that will come in the site-specific section.
Thanks so much, Atara. That was our last group of questions for tonight. I just want to reiterate something that Atara had mentioned earlier, that we'll be taking all of the questions and comments that were submitted tonight and reviewing them and providing some additional information in the near future. And I'll just pass it back to Atara to close us out for the evening.
Great. Thank you so much, Larissa, for managing the question. Thank you to everyone who's been here. I know we've lost some people at this point because it's getting late. I really encourage people to reach out if they have more comments, and hopefully you're already on our email list. If you're not, you can either sign up with this link to our website that's right here, or you can email me and we'll put you on, because that's the way you're going to find out about subsequent community presentations, opportunities for engagement. And in the next week or two, we should have actually up on our website all this material with an opportunity for you to actually engage with it and send us comments directly on the website, where you can comb through it. So that's all stuff that we're going to work on getting together now that we've done with these presentations. And of course, we'll send e-letters out when that is ready and available. And so please feel free to contact us with questions, comments. That's what we're here for. And we're just going to continue working and taking into account all sorts of things that we're hearing from people along the way. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and take care.